everyone. Welcome to our new season of Books Between Bites. I'm Becky Hogue, and my parents started this program 33 years ago. And so we started partnering with Batavia Library several years ago, and it's really wonderful to have this facility and all their equipment and room and setup. And we get together every June and work on the new program, and we're delighted to get it started. On the table over there are programs for the season, and we also have the website booksbetweenbites.com. And if you would like to get my monthly emails reminding about the upcoming program, there's a clipboard over there, and please just add your name to it before you leave, and I'll be happy to put you on our once-a-month mailing list. Before I introduce Sally, I want to mention, you see all the Mark Twain information around here. He's been sitting out front of the library for a few years, and now we're celebrating. And there is an evening with Mark Twain coming up, the 27th? 26th. There's a sign out there, and there's still room to sign up for that program. And then next month, October 17th, our wonderful Barbara Kalina from Batavia is going to do his book, The Innocents Abroad. And if you know Barb, she does not go lightly with anything she does, and she's immersed herself in this, and we're really looking forward to that. And then our mayor is coming for his 33rd program. He was the very first program when this program started at the Methodist Church 33 years ago. So he'll be here in November. And then in December, we're really happy to have Joanne Smith from the library trustees talk about her book. And I just want to put in a word, if you could see coding, if you have little tiny grandchildren or children or neighbors who talk about, and you read about coding, and you're like, what is that? That wasn't my generation learning that. I hope you'll come and let Joanne tell you what this is all about, because kindergartners are learning to code, and she's written a lovely book to kind of explain it. So don't let the topic keep you away. I think you'll be interested to learn someone who can really explain it to you. How many of you code out there? Do coding? So a few of you already know. I know a little bit of code, but I wouldn't write a whole page with it. So anyway, I was really happy to cross paths with Sally 2 or 3 times over the last few years, and we go back. Our fathers were both ministers, Methodist ministers in the Wisconsin Conference, and I worked at North Central College, where a lot of her family went. When I first graduated from college, I came up here and worked at North Central for 10 years. So her name has crossed my life several times. And when she sent about this book that she and her husband Tom have written, we wanted to make a place for it on the program. And so they live in Aurora, and she has a practice. Used to be in Oswego, but she has a practice in
St. Charles
and Warrenville. And we're really looking forward to her sharing. Oh, there's somebody here.
Who just walked in the door? It's Mark Twain.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, everybody. I came early. I have a whole week to get ready.
Oh, all right, all right.
The river looks so lovely, I want to go down and smoke a cigar down there. Just watch the water.
And
For a week.
all right, and it
If
looks
you don't see me
familiar.
down there, you'll see me on the bench right out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I'll be one place or the other.
Well, you were here 100 years ago, is that right?
150.
Yes, and it was not a good night. I was lonely. I was out away from my wife, and wrote some things about how sad I was not to be in Batavia,
Yeah.
but to be away from my family, and that was misinterpreted by some people. That
Yes.
I had some antipathy about
So
Batavia.
you're coming back to make amends that you really like
At least,
Batavia.
at least 2 amendments.
Well,
Thank you.
He looks good for 180.
yeah,
So sorry to interrupt.
that's all right. We just mentioned that you're gonna have
That's
an
what we
evening.
heard, so we had to prove it.
So those of you that don't know, we're celebrating that Mark Twain gave a lecture,
Lecture here in Batavia 150 years ago.
150 years ago. And the little Mark Twain cutouts, I took mine to Colorado and do selfies with Mark Twain all over. We'll have to see where all you've been with the cutout.
Full of apologies to Sally.
Yes,
Yeah.
persevere, everybody.
That's all right. So I will just now turn it over to Sally to tell you all the wonderful things she has to share today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. I appreciate it. We really are very thrilled to be invited to Batavia. We have been to some of the Books Between Bites presentations. This is such a lovely library, and it's such a beautiful community service to provide this for local authors. So and for other authors too. We got to see Amy Dickinson when she came, and that was really exciting. And thank you, Becky, for arranging this and having us remember some times with Reverend Lee and Betty Moorhead and my parents. So that's a nice connection. And we want to thank you for sharing some of your Thursday with us. This is at our house, this is premium nap time. If I'm home and I'm not working that day, then we may have put a lunch together after, if it's one of those days that we've gone out to work out at the health club and we come home and put a lunch together. And then we may watch some recorded TV from late night that we can't stay up for. So we watch it that next day and have some humor about that. And then if it's one of those days we need to, because I'm almost 68 and Tom's almost 73, we'll take a nice nap. It's one of the things I love about having some free time. So today we're really excited. It's fun to see some friends out in the audience and some people who are in the book, as well as some new faces. So we're excited that you're here. What we're going to do is spend a little time talking about the book, and then we're going to spend some time talking about aging. And some of you filled out cards. If you didn't get a card, raise your hand and Tom will give you a card. And we'll do maybe some conversation about some of the pros, some of the positives of aging, and some of the things that kind of get in our way about aging, as well as retirement. So we're going to do a little focus on that also. So even if you're not retired yet, you may want to listen in on that. And if you are retired, sharing some of your wisdom about that. I want to start with a story. One of the things that's been happening now this year since the book has been out is that some couples are finding the book and they're reading it and then they're contacting me and deciding that they want to do some work together about what's happening in their relationship. So I met with a couple recently who've been really struggling with how they can stay married after 37 years, with all the built-up resentment and the hurts that they'd experienced. It all kind of came to a head, and part of that was with their youngest child leaving for college, and then the husband receiving an invitation to relocate for his job, which then, as you can imagine, maybe being in that situation or knowing of that situation, that put an examination of their marriage under that microscope. So they reached out and they started doing some really good work. They're doing some heavy lifting to look at rebooting their marriage now that they are seeing if they can recommit to each other for the next several decades together. So they admitted that they wish that they had come to counseling earlier, but they're now feeling a sense of hope where they didn't feel that before. So part of the book, it contains a lot of the stories that we've been hearing as we decided to write the book. One of the things that happened for me is as a marriage and family therapist, I really love doing therapy. I am not a writer. My husband, Tom Johnson, is the writer. He's retired news editor from the Beacon News. And I really resisted writing a book. People had said, oh, everybody has a book in them. I didn't have that sense about myself. However, I use a lot of books in therapy, and when I went out trying to find some books to give my clients, I couldn't find any, or very few, about relationships. I found a lot about retirement and financial planning, a lot about retirement and the best places in America to live, and travel plans, but I didn't find very many focusing on the issues related to marriages and the changes that happen to relationships as people move into retirement and experience aging. So along the way, after some resistance, I decided to start writing a book. And I'm really glad I did, because it was really life-changing for me. And I think that Tom would say it's been good for our marriage. Since I would research for a while, and I would write for a while, and then Tom would edit for a while, and then I'd write some more for a while. Along the way, we decided to interview who we call the wise married elders. And those are people that have some distance from retirement and can look back on that phase in their life and what they wish they would have known during that time when they were moving into retirement. So we interviewed them for their gems, and that's contained throughout the book, as well as in one of the chapters where we focus on several of the interviews with the wise married elders. Some of them already had really strong marriages as they went into retirement, and they built on that and felt validated by some of what we ended up putting in the book. Some of them had to really reboot. They had to really reboot their marriage in order to literally save their marriage with the changes that had happened in retirement. So we have those stories in there. I also have composite client stories in the book, obviously with their permission. And we also decided to put in some of our own stories of our 47-year marriage. Not all the stories, a little TMI sometimes, but we put in some stories where we felt that was instructive for people. So I really enjoy stories. That's how I learn the best, is hearing other people's stories. I honestly think that's one of the reasons I'm a psychotherapist and that I love it so much, is I have a lot of curiosity about other people's stories. I'm imagining that because you're here in a library function, Books Between Bites, that you probably also are an audience of a lot of readers. And that's maybe one of the reasons why we love reading, is we love the stories that are contained in the books that we read, both fiction and nonfiction. So some of the stories are about couples where one's retired and one is not. And that's the journey Tom and I are on right now. Tom's been retired 7 years. I am not retired. I'm not working as much because we're traveling more, and I'm moving more into part-time work as a psychotherapist. But we're walking that talk that is part of that journey that we focus on in the book. It's also for couples going through questions about when are they going to retire, or where are they going to retire, or how are they going to retire. And we have some sections in there on that. We also have stories about couples that are not yet retired, who have issues that they've not addressed while trying to raise their children, while working in their careers, or maybe they've had patterns of avoiding conflict, and they're beginning to start to feel those rumbles of what's going to happen when they spend a lot more time together, and how do they want to handle that now? How do they want to learn some better ways to communicate, or some better ways to build emotional and sexual intimacy, or better ways to resolve conflict? We have some stories in there also about married and retired couples who were not so pleased with all the extra time they had together. And you may have, when you're getting together with your ladies or you're getting together with your men over coffee, you may hear some of those complaints and some of those surprises about the patterns we get into when we don't spend time. And then what happens when you do end up having time together. We also have stories in there about married and retired couples with very different views of what retirement means. One wants to use the savings, maybe, to redecorate the house. And maybe the other wants to downsize and wants to use their savings to travel the world. So how do they put those disparate ideas together and plan for a retirement that's satisfying to both of them? As I mentioned before, we also have a lot of stories in there of couples who really feel good about their marriage. And as they gave us those ideas and we shared their stories, we're hoping that if you're in that category, you can read some stories that help you feel validated about what you're already doing that really works well for you. We also included stories for widows and for people who are single. As you prepare for retirement, or as you look back on retirement, that anything we can do that improves our relationships and how we do ourselves in this time in our life, which might include some personal development, can also apply to any of us, no matter what status we have with each other in relationships, as well as how we relate as grandparents, how we relate if your parents are still with you, how we relate to our friends, and what happens to our own changes with ourselves at this age. So let me see. I can. Oh, I love this quote from Dr. Seuss. We did a lot of Dr. Seuss raising our children. Life's too short to wake up with regrets, so love the people who treat you right, forgive the ones who don't, and believe that everything happens for a reason. If you get a chance, take it. If it changes your life, let it. Nobody said it'd be easy. They just promised it would be worth it. Oh, let's see. Oh, kiddo, the cartoons didn't get in this one. We spent so much time getting the cartoons in this one, and they're not here. Let me see if they can be here. Let me just try for a moment.
While she looks, I was just thinking this morning, as being a newspaper man and fond of comic pages, for many years we were all reading the Gospel according to Peanuts. We were reading about Lucy, who gives psychiatric advice for 5 cents, but can't seem to figure out how she can get a romantic relationship with Schroeder, the piano player. Well, now it's the Gospel according to Pickles, a strip that has Earl and Pearl, an older couple, as they try to work out their relationship with their grandson and their dog and their cat and her plants. So we have a whole new gospel on the comic pages.
So the reason I'm trying to do this is Tom and I spent some time finding these fabulous cartoons to include into our keynote because we thought it would be really fun. And the version that is loaded here is not letting us see them. So I guess for whatever reason, we're going to make our own humor. So had the cartoon ended up in the keynote, what you would be seeing is a woman in the bathtub with her husband watching her. I mean, nicely covered up, right? And she says to him, "You know, honey, before you retired, I did not need a lifeguard." And then the other cartoon that followed that is a man in a reclining chair and a woman who's on the floor painting a line between her and her husband. And she says, "Honey, this is just what I need until I get used to you being around the house all the time." Again, so part of learning how to be with each other is learning when we need to state those boundaries for ourselves. Oh, okay. Well, let me get back to where we were.
I should add, there are a couple of stories in the book where one of the spouses who managed people in his or her job, when they retire, they start to manage the spouse. Especially the wife who has loaded the dishwasher for 25 years, and now the husband is saying, "No, you really should load it that way." The advice, of course, is to forget the loading of the dishwasher and talk about things that are more useful.
And it's never about the dishwasher, right? It's never about it.
No.
I'm just going to take a moment here just to let you know what's involved in this. We managed to keep our book to 20 chapters instead of the original 40. We thought possibly it would be more readable if we kept it under 300 pages. So it's in 4 sections, and the first is Facing the Challenges, Loving Your Marriage and Retirement, How to Use This Book, Retirement and Aging, Building Resilience, The Why Married Elders Speak, and then Can Your Marriage Survive Retirement? We decided to include chapter 5, even though we weren't originally going to do that, because as I delved more into it, it was important to also address people who decided that when they looked at their retirement and they looked at their marriage, it was no longer sustainable. And that chapter is really supporting people who come to that really hard decision, and the ways in which they can do that with each other in a way of giving each other blessings and reducing the possibility of more rancor within the family, and really the way to healthy, with consciousness, moving on to a way of being able to start their life in a new place with each other. It's a hard chapter, but it's also, we've gotten the feedback that it's an important chapter for people to have in there. The second section is Enhancing Togetherness, and it's about communication, about strengthening emotional intimacy, conflict resolution. Can we both be right? Yes, you can both be right. We have 2 chapters on sex. Sex is when it's naked nightly, and one when sex is stopped, and what we need to do in order to put that together for helping people find that again and coming to a mutual decision about that. And the third section is Being Your Best Self. And there we're talking about personal development and rediscovering yourself and each other. This retirement time or this aging time opens up possibly giving freedom to do some exploring that maybe you've put on the back shelf because of being busy with work or busy with children or busy with other responsibilities, like maybe taking care of your own elderly parents. So now all of a sudden you have some time and you want to maybe rediscover what's really important to you. What are your passions? What did you stop doing? What makes you smile? What makes you want to dance? What makes you feel more alive? And so we have a section in there about personal development. Okay.
Just click it on again and push play, and then you can move it with that, I think.
Okay.
Try to
I'm
play.
learning lots of new things about this.
Up there. Just click play, and it'll open the full screen
Okay.
again. Up on top.
On top. Oh, right here?
Yeah. And there you go. And then use the remote.
And then the third section is Being Your Best Self. We were talking about personal development. There's a section on health and laughing and moving. Spirituality, so it's really holistic in terms of where you're at with coming to your own understanding. And we tried in that chapter to be very inclusive of a lot of different faiths and perspectives. And then finally, facing serious illness and facing death. And some of the really powerful stories of couples that have had to face that and what that's meant for them. Then finally, the last section is on enjoying retirement, looking at lifestyle choices, and the predominant theme being do it now. Don't put anything off. We don't have any guarantees. We don't have any promises. All of us have stories of people that wanted to do something and they weren't able to do that, or stories of people that were able to do some things, and we're grateful that that happened. The other generations, looking at our relationship with our children, our grandchildren, and maybe our parents. And then looking at the enrichment that comes with our friendships. In chapter 18, we look at retirement choices, and we have a lot of different possibilities there, different options of ways in which people have been really creative about how to be that. And then we have a section in designing your own retirement plan with a lot of questions that would encourage you to talk with each other. And if you're already retired, maybe going back and revisiting some of those questions. And then finally, the last chapter of Grow Old with Me. The best is yet to come.
Should I go ahead and do one of the readings?
and then you can do yours too?
Yes.
Does that sound okay? Okay.
You are the one, yes.
Are you okay with that? You guys want to hear a reading?
Sure.
All right, excellent. This is
You want to hear a reading?
This is one of the couples that I had a lot of fun with. This is in chapter 3 on retirement and aging and building resilience. Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, is the opening line to a well-loved Robert Browning poem, popularized by the Beatles' John Lennon. I see this image of Tom and me holding on tightly to each other as we walk a path into the woods with the sunlight streaming through the trees. It gives me a warm and loving feeling. Examining our marriages as we prepare for retirement requires courage, as well as a good sense of humor, and a belief that it is worth the effort. As the saying goes, growing old is not for sissies, and growing old with your spouse is not for sissies either. Allowing ourselves to take a good look at how we relate to each other in marriage strengthens our connection and opens the way to being more clear about our choices, bringing more satisfaction and happiness into our lives. This next story illustrates some of the things that couples do as they look at marriage and retirement. The couple came into my office already arguing. Gina was fuming. She looked at her husband, John, with disgust and said, I am telling you right now, I am not going to listen to you go on and on every moment of the day about when and what is going on in the bathroom, how your back feels, how your knees hurt, and hear every belch, cough, and sneeze with your commentary. They were off. If this is what retirement is going to be like, I'm going to tell the school board to rip up my retirement letter, my resignation letter. John, sitting on the couch next to her, probably a little too closely for her comfort, wisely let her keep talking without interrupting. I encouraged her to say more and complimented him for doing a good job listening. The couple returned from marriage counseling after a trip to visit their oldest son and his family. They barely spoke to each other on the plane home. When they did start talking, both agreed that they had been arguing more, feeling more tense, and not sleeping well. They knew they needed to figure out what was going on. They had worked with me several years before during a crisis with their younger son. Their marriage was in pretty good shape then, and they needed only a few sessions to improve their communication and learn the skill of detachment with love and support. Now they were seeking guidance through this time of this transition. John, 66, had retired from a management job when he was 60. Gina, 62, a high school teacher, was planning to retire at the end of the school year. She had mixed feelings about leaving. She was aware that she had already started to grieve the loss of what she loved about being in the classroom and thought she might greatly miss the daily contact with her students and colleagues. She put on a happy face for others and saved her grief, which was taking the form of increased irritation for her husband. Her husband, on the other hand, was excited about her retirement, already planning trips for extended times away now that they would both be free. He had relaxed into a comfortable retirement routine, sleeping later, going out to exercise, meeting his buddies at the local coffee shop, spending several hours a week volunteering. His biggest stressor was his 87-year-old mother, who had recently moved into a nursing home in a neighboring community. With support, they both were able to identify what they were feeling and what they needed. Quickly, the tension level decreased and the arguing lessened. An example, by the way, of a really healthy couple. They agreed to learn some better ways to resolve conflicts, including how to lighten up and laugh more. They decided that John would limit himself to 10 minutes each morning for an update on his bodily functions. And Gina would listen, but if he began to bring it up later in the day, she would remind him, tell me tomorrow. They also recommitted to some more quality time together, taking a break from their long to-do lists and having what they called snuggle cuddle time. A few sessions later, they left the office a happier couple, agreeing that they would call if needed. Good example of good work. Do you want to do a reading?
Yes, and just briefly. I tell people this is a
Maybe better using your...
This book is kind of a 90-10 position. She's the 90, I'm the 10. I'm just a word mechanic. But once in a while at the end of a chapter, I had thoughts of my own to pass on, and here's one of them. Once you pass 70, and several of you on your cards noted that sometimes a nice thing about growing older is people think you're smart. Or maybe they realize you have been smart all the time. But my note is, once you pass 70, you might wonder just how many people are more elder than you. But at any age, people have some wisdom to pass on, directly or through the stories they tell. Well into her 80s, my mom would relate the story of when a woman took umbrage or exception at her brother, my Uncle Bob, because he was holding the door open for her. There was a time when some people thought that this was condescending and sexist or whatever. Hearing her objection, my uncle said, "I'm not holding the door open for you because you are a lady. I'm holding it for you because I am a gentleman." And the closing thought is that courtesy, whether of the gentlemanly kind or not, is never out of fashion.
So we had you filling out these cards when you first came in. I'm wondering if we could just share a little bit of those ideas. I've got a card in front of me. Do you have some? Do you have some too?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. And you're welcome to just join in and add your own. This person said, "I like growing older because I can use my knowledge gained. I don't like growing older because my body can't do what it used to. I like being retired because the daily stress is easier to manage. I do not like being retired because I miss the people who had some interests and some similar interests for learning and sharing from a technology background." You can relate to that. Oh, this is a good one. "I don't mind growing older because think of the alternative." That's an important thing to keep remembering to ourselves. "I like being retired because of travel and activities. I like growing older because I get a regular free time. I get regular scheduled retirement checks and through Medicare. I get more forgetful." That's one of the things I don't like about growing older. I get more forgetful, and I have to take too many pills. I was talking with an older woman the other day, and her health goal is she's in her mid-70s. She wants to be 80 and not take any pills. I said, wow, that would be interesting to see what changes she would need to do in order to make that happen in her life. And then, of course, sometimes the pills we take are life-sustaining, so we don't have a choice about that. "I like being retired because I can schedule my own days better. I don't like being retired because of too many things to do and not enough time."
I should mention on a couple of cards that I've looked over, people say they like being retired because they have a lot of time, but there's another side to that coin. Their friends think that they have all the time in the world. And they're saying, hey, I still have a schedule. My time is still my own and not yours to claim.
One of the things I really appreciated about Tom when he retired is that he was very kind of amused by the number of people that wanted to plan his time before he retired. You know, you can volunteer for the food pantry, you could do this at church, you could do that with this group and with that group. And Tom was kind of committed to just allowing himself, after so many newspaper deadlines for so many years, to just not have to set an alarm clock, to find his own daily routine again, and deliberately for 6 months chose not to make any commitments. And that was a recommendation that came through several times with the wise married elders. Do you have any cards there you want to? Well, he's finding out. Does anybody want to jump in and add what you like about aging or you like about retirement? Yeah, go ahead.
My husband retired first, and for years, living short, and it's hard for me to reach things. You know, I asked to have pull-out cabinets and all this stuff. It's really hard to get to. When he retired, That's when I got them, because he realized how difficult it was to get to the cabinets and everything. So then I got the pull-out cabinet. There's a lot of good points sometimes about them retiring, you know. Things get done because they can see it better.
You can actually experience it. Yeah.
All of us have uneasiness about some things about retirement, and that's reflected in some of the cards too. People, we fear cognitive decline. We fear that, I can't remember people and so forth that we used to. Sally's parents declined to have a 60th anniversary celebration because they were, Dad was a minister, and they just didn't feel confident that all the people that would come to their 60th anniversary party, that they would be able to remember their names and faces, and they would be embarrassed if they couldn't. That's certainly the other side of it. And all of us realize that as we get older, our bodies are a little less compliant. I was playing catch with my grandsons once, and there was this ball that came my way, and I thought, oh, 2 steps, and I'll pick that up. And 1 step, and it was by me. So we all face that.
Well, we can add some other ideas. I want to share with you some of what we were able to get from the Wise Married Elders. And this is just a compilation of several ideas that we wanted to share today. Our attitudes about aging impact every aspect of our lives, mind, body, and spirit. We can that's almost kind of an obvious, but if we actually pull that apart and start thinking about it for ourselves, if we're having a grumpy day and we're in a lot of pain because of chronic pain, it's really hard to keep ourselves upbeat and to keep ourselves from having a more cheerful disposition. The more positive we are, the less pain we feel. That's been indicated in research, which I find fascinating. The more happiness we report, the more lively our lives. Aging often brings more focus on our aches and pains. Pay attention to the way you talk about yourself and monitor how much you complain. We have a favorite couple that we like to get together with. When they have a dinner party, the husband asks people to only tell 1 story about their aches and pains. And if they're over 80, they get to have 2 stories. And if somebody forgets and begins to tell another story, the husband or the wife will remind them that there's so much more to who they are than their aches and pains. And we'll ask them a question about, share something about what's in your heart or what's in your mind. I like being reminded about that. Be gentle with yourself and your loved ones. Sometimes we can be truly, really, really hard and get focused on that. And we switch then over to more of those positive statements, and what happens when we bring in more gentleness with ourselves and our loved ones. Don't sweat the small stuff, truly. Let go of the feelings of resentment. It hurts your spirit and your body to carry them, and they turn into bad cells. More and more we're getting some more research about how that all interfaces with our health. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted. So we have a responsibility to see how we're doing that with other people and with ourselves. Understand that changes bring loss, even if we choose the loss. Sometimes we sometimes minimize that. Well, I wanted to retire, or I wanted to do this, or I wanted to go to a different house. And we get a little bit caught off guard sometimes if we find ourselves grieving, or we find ourselves being more ornery or stressed out when we chose to make that change. Well, any change is stressful. Keep improving your ability to be flexible by being aware of resistance to change. And how many, as we get older, how often as we get older, we're having to respond more and more to changes in our life. Even the sweet Stacy helped me this morning with getting my flash drive and my PowerPoint to work. And we didn't go do it all the way, Stacy. No, nothing to blame for you. It's obviously how I saved it. But that's one of those changes that as I'm aging, I'm becoming less resilient to. is something that technology I used to be able to do easily now may throw me, or I might have nightmares about whether or not my PowerPoint's going to work the next day. Looking for ways to laugh. Using gratitude to improve our perspective. Just kind of looking at this audience, I think that's something you guys already do. And how powerful that changes, even how our brain is working. When we think about being grateful, even if it's something that's kind of a mixed bag. And we bring that gratitude into our heart, and then bring that from our heart up into our eyes. And then look to that next person. Look to our loved ones, or look to that next person that's waiting on us with gratitude. Committing to regular ways to move your body. Getting the blood flowing. It doesn't necessarily have to be exercise. It's just moving to get the blood flowing. Building strength, improving fitness, and as well as well-being. This next one, monitor your use of alcohol, painkillers, and over-the-counter medications to avoid unhealthy dependence. It's kind of like what I said earlier. Some of us need to do that because it's life-sustaining, but some of us are doing it unconsciously. And I'm running into more and more people in this age group that are not being as conscious about how they're using alcohol and painkillers. Consider writing your memoir. I have more people that are doing that, and we're sharing our stories with each other, and I love reading other people's stories. And the whole idea of taking some time, setting up some time aside, and reflecting back on your life and deciding, what is it that I want to write about? What is it I want to tell my grandchildren about? My father, who died at 93, wrote 104 grandpa stories. He called them grandpa stories. Each of them were 3 or 4 pages long, and they were well written. We have them in a big notebook, so that we have those stories that are really his legacy. I wish I had more from my mom. Probably several of us may feel that way. So I pulled this quotation from the book. Dr. Northrup is somebody that I've used and used some of her materials. Whatever doesn't feed our soul and doesn't make us feel vibrantly loved needs to fall by the wayside now. Our lives have no room for such things anymore. Everything we say and do from this point on will either keep us active, engaged in living, passionately and joyfully, or it will hasten degeneration and increase our chances of poor health and disease. It's our choice to make. And she writes about this being a middle age from on challenge for each of us. David Brooks, in his recent book, Second Mountain. Have any of you read Second Mountain by David Brooks? It's a recent find of mine. It's a recent book of his. He writes about having legacy virtues and, he writes about having resume virtues and legacy virtues. And the resume virtues are about what we've accomplished. And how many, as he writes, he became vice president of his firm and had thousands and thousands of Southwest miles. Okay, so that's about what he accomplished. Versus our legacy virtues. What is it that we want to be remembered for? How is it that we brought meaning into our life and we share that with our loved ones? We share that meaning. And hopefully then inspiring others. Anybody want to make any comments about aging right now before I move on? All right, we'll allow a little bit more time at the end for questions. So then I pulled some ideas about what the wise married elders said about retirement. Retirement may involve leaving a job you love and people you care about. Grieving the loss is part of the healthy process of letting go, and finding a new sense of self. I really encourage, as you move into this, to spend some time figuring out who are you when you're not who you were. Who are you when you're not your title or what you did? Allow unstructured and unplanned time to explore and discover after years of being tied down to a job and a schedule. Sit with the discomfort. Often people will start to feel a little uncomfortable about looking at the question of who they are if they're not who they were. And they very quickly busy themselves with volunteering or doing this task or doing that. And I'm encouraging people to expand your tolerance for sitting with discomfort. Maybe talking with a friend about it, maybe doing some writing, maybe putting it aside and coming back to it later to find out what's coming up for you on a deeper level. Resist making commitments right away, maybe for months or years. Retire to something as well as from something by selecting an activity that makes you smile and gives a sense of accomplishment. Those two together may feel like they're a little bit conflictual, that they're opposites, but they really aren't. As people retire from what they've been doing, it's nice to have some things in mind about what they want to do with their time or how they want to be. For some of it, maybe it's just taking a daily walk that they didn't have time to do before, or maybe not setting their alarm clock. For others, it may be bigger projects like seeing every national park. I love that. That's one of the things on our bucket list. And then another idea that came up consistently with the Wise Married Elders is to plan a getaway, even if it's a short one, to celebrate the event of retirement. And if you're not retiring together, then you're retiring at separate times. You get two events. One of the couples we interviewed took a 6-month. He had gradually retired over the years, going from full-time doctoring to part-time, and then finally ending. His wife, who was a nurse, had retired earlier than that. And she wasn't really ready for him to be home full-time, so she was liking that he was phasing off and doing it part-time. When he finally retired, they took a 6-month cruise. And then when they came back, things were totally changed. Before they left on the cruise, they had downsized from their house into a smaller condominium right on the bike trail. When they came back, everything was different. Now, not a lot of us can afford a 6-month cruise, but what we can do is plan some event that celebrates that we're having this big change in our life. Maybe you go away for a weekend, or you have a big party. The problem with retirement is that you never get a day off. So we have to be in charge of making that for ourselves, because we're in charge of our schedule. It's pretty awesome. And then consistently, the message that keeps coming up for us, and maybe it's just one that Tom and I need to keep hearing, is do it now. Don't put it off. Do it now. One of the people that we interviewed for the book, Loy and Linda, when they retired, they went on, they had a sailboat, and they had been kind of getting ready for retirement. They went on some sailboat cruises where they were the team, and they talked about how quickly they had to learn to work together. When you're on a small sailboat, you got to resolve those conflicts. You got to figure out what you're going to do in response to that storm coming up, or in response to the kitchen getting low. Linda, shortly after that, developed a life-threatening disease and has since passed. So they were so grateful that they were able to do some of these things and had not put it off. So that's one of their strong messages. I think we probably each have stories about that. So we're moving now toward the end, and we're going to do our book signing in a minute. But we're wondering if any of you want to jump in with a question or a comment from your own retirement or your own sense of aging. What would you like to share? A lot of smiles. You're looking at me with smiles. Okay. Before I go into this, I wanted to just share a really quick little story. Our 8-year-old, our grandchildren live down in St. Louis, which is a bit of a hike for us, but we're really grateful to be able to spend time with them. Our 8-year-old loves to play games, and recently, at the last couple visits, he's brought out strategy games that Grandpa and Grandma have some difficulty with. They're hard. They require strategy, and they require memory, and they require me to pay attention. And I want to make sure I've not just had a glass of wine before I say goodnight to him. I've got to stay alert. And one of them is called Pause. Cobra Pause. And it's like with tiles. Do you have that one? Yeah. It looks kind of like, they're tiles, and it's a memory game, and you have to match it, and you have to be fast. So both of us really didn't do a very good job, and Evan kept winning. So we decided when we got back last time, we were going to order our own copy. So we've been practicing at home. Evan doesn't know that Papa and Grandma have been practicing. And we tie it, because we've been on a revisiting West Wing. We've been on a West Wing binge when we just kind of need a break from the real world. And we won't let ourselves watch a West Wing until we've played at least one game of Cobra Paw. So depending on which one of us wins, it might mean that we have to do a second one of Cobra Paw, because of course, we got to both have a chance to win. The second game is called Chick-a-Pig. Any of you familiar with that? Chick-a-Pig. It's a simplified version of chess, and it is hard. But it's with chickens and pigs and cows and piles of poop, and it's just, it's something that an 8-year-old would, not real poop, not real, little brown things. Something an 8-year-old would really relate to. We have a riot playing it, but often Evan will kind of look at Mom and kind of Grandma, and it's kind of like, really? Do you want to make that move, Grandma? I kind of want to make a different move, Grandma. So we've been practicing with Chick-a-Pig too. Hopefully we'll be doing better.
Question,
Yeah, please.
do you need to know chess first?
No, because I don't. I think it's a great question, though. He does, however. And so my next thing that I want to take on at some point, when I feel up to the challenges, I really would love to learn how to play chess. It's been one of my desires. How many of you in here play chess? Oh, wow, a lot of hands up. All right. Do you think it's doable? Or do you have to be young to learn it?
No.
No? Okay, you're encouraging me.
Yes.
Okay, cool, good. And it keeps your brain, do you feel like it keeps your brain going? I kind of feel it. Like even when I'm playing Cobra Paws, I honestly feel like the dendrites in my brain are growing. I really feel like I'm putting down some new memory pathways. There's one other one I want to share with you before this one. See if I can backtrack it. I like this idea about us embracing our eldership, embracing being elders. And what I mean by that is that we can embrace getting older and not taking on a lot of the negative ideas from our culture about what being old means, but rather reinvent what we want to be as old, aging, with some things to share with conscious aging. I like the idea of embracing that we do have wisdom that has come from living, just simply from being alive, and having some consciousness about conclusions we've come to because of the events in our life and how we've dealt with them. I also like that idea that as we get older, instead of becoming bitter, none of us want to hang around bitter old people that are just grouchy, is to allow ourselves to become more sweet, to allow ourselves to become more kind, to allow ourselves to become more forgiving, and letting that be part of the gift we give to the next generation, is to show them how to do that from a place of our perspective, knowing that we have a different perspective, having lived as long as we have. So this quote from Jack Kornfield, I like a lot. Do not ignore the effects of each wise action, says the Buddha, thinking this will come to nothing. Just as by the gradual fall of raindrops, the water jar is filled, so in time, the wise become filled with the sweetness and goodness of their actions. So part of what I want to leave with you today is your own awareness of yourself. What is it that is your special sweetness, your special goodness? And that may change from year to year, day to day. But being aware that that's something that you share, and that something that you can have received by the people that are gifted by your presence. So before we end, any questions? We are going to do a book signing. We're kind of excited about that. And we want you to keep in mind that Christmas is coming, and if it makes a nice retirement gift for some people. Our subtitle of the book, Loving Your Marriage and Retirement. Keep the music playing. There's references to music throughout the book and in every chapter. Every chapter has a reflection, and every chapter also has a chant that we suggest. And we started with Marilyn and Alan Bergman's song, How Do You Keep the Music Playing? And that weaves as a theme through the whole book. Their song ends with this phrase: if we can be the best of lovers, yet be the best of friends, if we can try with every day to make it better as it grows, with any luck, then I suppose the music never ends. Thank you very much for being with us today and sharing this time. Thank you very much, Becky.